All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Speed Traveler Roadshow here on KHTS Radio, hometownstations.com. You can also find us anywhere you get your podcast. My name is Charlie Frank, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Chris Evertsen, albeit remotely today. How you doing today, Chris?
Doing great. Good, Charlie. I'm glad to be here with you this morning on the radio. Some good news and bad news on the airwaves as far as motorsports are concerned.
Yeah, and what Chris is alluding to is there's some big Formula One topics we're going to get to in the last segment of our show. But if you're new to the Speed Traveler Roadshow, we basically talk about everything related to cars, buying cars, selling cars. Chris and I have bought and sold hundreds of cars. Making money on it, which is kind of a new thought, right, Chris? But
a novelty, if you will.
A novelty, yeah. It's kind of like instead of buying stocks, you can buy cars that are going up in value. So that's really fun. Also, as Chris mentioned, we're going to talk Formula One. That's going to be a little bit later in this show. Today, we're going to talk about some Formula One travel and some of the races that we've been to and some of the races that we love that are on the F1 schedule. We're also going to talk about the Ford. Today, the featured mark of the day is the Ford Mustang. And we're going to talk about some Ford Mustangs that you could buy now for $30,000 that will most likely double in value. So that's always a nice thing, Chris.
Yeah, and the dark horse. Yeah. I'm really excited to get into the dark horse again.
Yeah. And
it's just such a rad car.
And with that, let's talk a little bit of Ford news, Chris. Couple things. You mentioned the dark horse. That is the Ford Mustang dark horse. It is a 500 horsepower, 6-speed manual. At least that's an option. It's kind of like the swan song, I think, of the V8 with the manual transmission. And what a cool car.
Yeah, it's a great car, and I'm glad to see that it's still, at least for this model year, offered in the manual transmission. So many brands have announced the last ever manual transmissions being available in their cars in the previous year. And this year they're all in the paddle shifter or automatic transmissions. But to have that big 500 horsepower engine, with a 6-speed manual transmission, really exciting. I mean, it sounds great. The car sounds great. It's wild to watch and listen to out on the track. And it's just a beast.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a relatively affordable car or basically supercar, $60,000. And it's got some really cool features. It's got the special Magna Ride dampers. It's got the Brembo 6-piston front calipers, brake calipers. And it's got the strut tower braces, stiffer suspension. You can actually get a special handling package for an additional $5,000. So if you're going to go and buy one of these, you might as well load it all the way up because it's a car that'll be worth money down the road. And you'll kick yourself now if you didn't get all the features.
100%, but you keyed on a key component there. Get the features, but get the performance features. Don't worry about the fluff and the trim. Get the suspension system because that makes a huge difference on the performance. It's already, like you mentioned, the Brembo brakes, so it's already got all the stopping power in the world. And that way, with great brakes and with a great handling characteristics, you can really show off that 5.0 liter Coyote V8 engine.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a cool car, and Ford is basically saying, I mean, it might just be a marketing ploy to get people to buy it. It's kind of like Kiss is on their final tour, and how many years has Kiss been doing their final?
The 27th reunion or 27th anniversary of their final tour.
Yeah, this is Kiss's exactly. I remember our friend Ricky Terranova begging me to go with them to Las Vegas in about 2000 to see Kiss's absolute final tour. They're never going to tour again. So I don't know if that's the case here with Ford, but they are saying that this is going to be the last V8 available in a manual. I hope not. But
Yeah. I mean, it's possible, but I just don't see Ford and particularly the Mustang ever completely getting away from the V8 manual. I mean, they might skip a generation like a lot of other brands have done just to create a little bit of exclusivity within the mark.
Right.
But to your point of why to buy this one is even if they don't do a manual transmission for 2 years and they bring it back in 2007 or 2027, it's still going to be a much more valuable car than the automatic or the paddle shifting car. So
Yeah,
I really don't see Ford ever getting away from the V8 though.
yeah, I know. They could say what they want, but you're right. It might just be a strategy to bring it back 2 years from now. And that would be pretty clever, actually, on their part. But there is nothing that will replace the sound of a V8. Of course, some people, our friend, what's her name? Greta Thornburg?
Thornburg.
Wouldn't be too happy with, she'd much prefer to be 4-cylinder turbos. But it's kind of
she's way all the way over there in Europe and even closer to town. You get communities like Laguna Seca, the areas around Laguna Seca. The homes that have been there were built after the track was built in, what was it, 1957?
Yep.
They're now they're suing the track because of noise.
Yeah, exactly. Move into a community that has a racetrack since 1957 and then get mad about the noise and sue the track. But yeah, you're referring.
And that's what this car is all about. I mean, this car is all about the noise and the sound and the smoke coming off the tires. It's all about being environmentally unconscious.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe, we're going to talk Formula One a little bit later, but there's rumors that Ford is going to get back into Formula One racing, at least supplying a motor. And they, the rules for 2026 in Formula One is they're going to get rid of the hybrid system. I mean, that's what's proposed right now. It's not fact. It's not going to happen. It isn't written in ink quite yet. But they're talking about high revving motors that use 100% alternative fuels or renewable fuels without the hybrid system. So that's pretty interesting that they're going away from that.
It's interesting. I mean, we're kind of shifting gears a little bit here, but I mean, it's, they're saying the hybrid technology is too expensive. And it's like, that is so funny because that's like contrary to what every government entity in the United States is trying to push for.
Right. Yeah.
Saying it's, and Formula One is saying it's too expensive.
Yeah.
Formula One saying it's too expensive. This is a $100 billion industry, annual industry, and they're saying it's too expensive. But I love the fact that it may go away from the hybrid technology and go back to just a combustion engine using alternative fuels. And by the way, Ford has one of the most winning Formula One engines of all time. That was a high revving engine that could easily just be dropped right back into any Formula One car today, and that's the DFV, which won championships from 1974 all the way up until 1989, I think.
Yeah. No, I think the Ford has a long history in Formula One racing, and they did such a good job. But yeah, they've got some other issues too. It is interesting that F1 is kind of taking a step back from hybrid. We had some Ford news that they're cutting the production of the new F-150 Lightning, which is the electric version. And it is interesting. I mean, Chris and I do a lot of work with dealers, and the dealers have been complaining to us quietly that they're not moving electric cars like they were. And so there's still a demand. But yeah, interesting on the Ford side that they're getting back into racing and not highlighting electric motors or hybrid motors.
Which is interesting, because we just had the Daytona 24-hour, and not jumping too deep in the F1 news, but Cadillac has been partnered up with Andretti Motorsports, and they've been looking at their Formula One bid, and the Cadillac got second place in their category with an electric hybrid motor.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give anything away for our next topics, but that's a key factor in what we'll be talking about in just a moment.
Yeah. But back to the dark horse. It's a cool car. Ford saying that this could be the very last V8 with a 500 horsepower engine in a manual transmission. And also, I mean, I know this show.
I think the takeaway there, though, Charlie, is the fact that they're saying manual. And it's not we're going to lose the V8. We're just going to lose the manual transmission. Right. For a generation, not a generation, for a year or two, maybe. But the V8's not going away, especially with, like you mentioned, the Ford F-150 Lightning, the electric pickup truck. And that's basically going away. And there's no way the V8 engine's going away because that fits right into that F-150 platform. And it's been there since the inception of the Ford F-150.
Right,
and
right.
It's not going to go anywhere. So we're not losing the V8 motor.
Right. Yep. No, I hope not. I mean, let's hope not, and let's hope it always stays there. But some of the brands, like last week we were talking about Maserati, and Maserati is getting away with their V8 motor that was supplied by Ferrari, and go into their own 6-cylinder turbo. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a trend. I don't think you can ever replace the rumble of a V8. So hopefully it lives quite a while. And if it runs on alternative fuel, all the better, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about Toyota and their engine development in making their combustion engine run off of ammonia. So that's really cool. So there's lots of alternative fuels out there. We all heard of E85.
Right.
And it actually works really well in race cars too. In lower horsepower category race cars, it works really, really well. So, and the series we race in is looking at going to alternative fuels as well, it's pretty cool to see that trend happening. I'm all for conservation. I'm all for development of new technologies. So I'm excited to see where we're going in that respect.
Agreed.
I'm just not excited on how it's being ramrodded down our throats to have to go one particular direction.
Well, you sort of teased our next segment. When we come back from break, we're going to talk some politics, and we're going to talk about some new crazy laws that are on the block in California, and maybe talk a little bit about EV mandates. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. All right. Well, welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow here on KHTS Radio in Newhall, California. You can also find us anywhere you download your podcasts. Also on YouTube at The Speed Traveler. That's a great way to communicate with us. If you're curious about a Corvette or a Ferrari or a Ford or any of the other cars we've talked about in the past, you can go to our YouTube channel, and all of these shows are there. So if you're in the market for a Corvette, you can go listen to that Corvette podcast and radio show and get a good idea of what are the best Corvettes to buy, what are the ones that are going up in value. But I'm joined here by my co-host and fellow traveler, Chris Evertsen. And Chris, there's some crazy new laws being proposed in California.
Yeah, I think we need that dramatic organ sound, dun, dun, dun.
Right. And for those of you who don't know, we're talking about SB 961, that's Senate Bill 961, that would require all cars built and sold in California from 2027 on to have a limiter so that you could go no faster than 10 miles an hour above the posted speed limit. And Chris, I'm curious.
I love how we're moving away from the land of the free to the land of the speed restricted.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of have a feeling.
Can you please take away more of my rights to be an idiot?
Yeah. And so, with that said, I was curious what your thoughts. I had a suspicion of what your thoughts might be on this, but why don't you tell everyone, all our listeners, what your thoughts are on this?
It's going to be a lot of asterisks right here.
Right.
Beep, beep. This is absurd. It's like I don't even know where to start. I'm on my soapbox. I haven't had any coffee for at least 5 hours, but I'm so pumped with adrenaline and just, a little bit of resentment. Not a little bit, a lot of resentment to all these rules that are telling me, how I have to vacuum clean my home. We're going back to, it's like, oh, wait, I got to get rid of my electric weed whacker because it's making too much noise. I have to buy a new electric weed whacker because it's got this muffler on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is, the amount of fatalities in California has risen since 2019. And this is just a really random, seems like very controlling way to try and combat that problem. I mean, I would say maybe come up with something that if you're in a car, you can't text. I mean, I can't drive 30 seconds on the freeway here, the 405 freeway in Southern California, without seeing a car around me weaving because the person's texting. So, I mean, I would say
why
that.
Don't we make some more? Why don't we make some more rules about that?
Exactly.
Let's treat the symptoms, not the it's just ridiculous. And part of this is like, what are some of the things we can do? Well, why don't we put some higher mandates on drivers' education?
Right.
Why don't we hire people to be, or businesses to be driver education platforms and teach young drivers, even old drivers, how to drive smartly and responsibly.
Yeah, I love that idea. And if anyone from the Department of Motor Vehicles in California is listening, the Speed Traveler would love to do that project and teach people. But I agree with you. I mean, that is a great way to start. You have to have someone, because we've all seen it. We've all been on the freeway and you see someone like tailgating and like, let's say it's a young person that maybe doesn't have a lot of experience behind the wheel, and that they're probably not even aware of how dangerous they're acting and the peril that they're putting other cars in. I think there's definitely those ultra aggressive kind of road ragey type people. I'm not even talking about that. I mean, that's its own problem. But I'm talking about the people that come up and, I was driving back from Palm Desert yesterday and there was someone like 10 feet behind the car texting and like on the phone, and it was a young lady, and I'm not saying it's a male or female thing. It's just, I don't think she had any idea how dangerous, that those actions were. And you're right. Like, imagine how many accidents you could prevent if people had to take a 1-day class, 8-hour class on safety.
It's not unreasonable to offer this in high school.
No, it's not.
The age at which kids are getting their license is 16 in, I think it's every state in the union now. It used to be 18 in some other states. I think it's 16. And, that's the high school years. And, when you're 16, I don't care if you're male or female, you're kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. And when you don't know that something is stupid, you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So let's educate people, and let's educate young folks. Let's educate mature people into knowing what they don't know. And here's the thing. Tailgating, you're 10 feet behind a car. It doesn't matter if you're going 15 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour. That car in front of you stops, you're still going to hit it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it lessens perhaps the grandness of an accident, or I shouldn't say grandness, but the scale of an accident if you're going a little bit slower. But
right.
The accident still happens, and so we're not preventing the accident.
Yeah.
We're just preventing how big the accident is with the speed regulation. And if we just teach people how to drive the car, you actually prevent the accident.
Yeah. And Chris and I have spent our lives as race car driving instructors, and we offer driving experiences for all sorts of automotive brands. And you definitely need some, I mean, it could be fun. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a dreadful experience where people are hating to go. It could be something really fun where you're at a racetrack and you get some speed. And then, of course, an exercise with some water where the cars are going to lose control, so people can understand how to perhaps save a skid, or understand that what happens in those situations, in like a dramatic situation when you're about to get in an accident. And I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, that just seems like a much better way to prevent accidents, and no one's really talking about that. I don't know, maybe we should go talk to the guy who proposed this is the senator from California, Scott Wiener. I don't know if it's Wiener or Wiener. I prefer the Wiener pronunciation, because he's proposed this 10 miles an hour and over limit on your cars. But getting back, Chris, to the
I gotta stay on that topic for just a moment, though. When we were 6 years old and 8 years old, and we had our Briggs and Stratton go-karts, and they had the little governor on there, I get that. But
right.
We're adults making our own decisions, and this, forget about the education versus limiting the speed limit. This is just another rule to create industry and costs that regular consumers can't afford.
Yeah.
like, wait a second, now I got to buy a new car, and this governor that's going to go on my engine is going to cost this much more. I'm just tired of all this stuff being, we are really turning into a very communist state.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that because I am such a California dude. I grew up.
I agree.
I grew up bike riding. I grew up, skiing.
I know.
All the things we've done in our lives, and so I'm a free spirit in every sense of the word, and that's what California always represented. And we are just going so far away of what the picturesque idea and reality that California should be into this communist California state.
Yeah, and we only have a couple minutes left on this topic, but also I think that what happens is once the government can restrict how fast over the speed limit you can go, then they could restrict what days you drive. For instance, they could restrict, if they don't want people driving to the desert, they could say, the park's not open on this day and there's no driving in that area. It's really pretty scary when you let government have a little bit of say in your freedom. It's pretty scary because where does it stop?
Yeah, and that is the question of the day. Really, is where does it stop? Because look, I'm a law-abiding, I'm a rules follower overall. I want to follow the rules. I want to be within the confines of what is legally correct and not correct. But there has to be, to what you were saying, Charlie, there has to be a line of reasonable human and citizen rights that's not overpowered by government entities.
Yeah.
Government overreach is getting a little bit too far in the very personal individual world. And it's really government for me is more about looking at the bigger picture in a commercial way, in maybe an environmental way, in a safety way. But to tell me that I can't go 30 miles an hour versus I have to go 20 miles an hour versus 30 miles an hour. I mean, there's a sign that already says that.
Yeah.
There's a sign that already says that. And, to have this now, what I think would be a very dangerous thing. I mean, imagine if you're cooking along on the freeway at 70 miles an hour, the speed limit 60 miles an hour, and you happen to just kick over 71 miles an hour, and all of a sudden this regulator kicks in. The car behind you that's doing 70 miles an hour is going to rear-end you.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge issues.
And imagine
technology is growing, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, and imagine the out on the Pear Blossom Highway, which is between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. There's all sorts of areas where the speed limit is 60 miles an hour, and then it'll come into a little town and it'll turn into 40. So, you're going to blow into those towns and the car's going to slam the brakes on. And, that's definitely going to cause an accident. So this is.
Yeah, I mean, who hasn't been on 395 heading up to Mammoth Lake, and you're coming to Lone Pine, and the speed limit literally, to your point, goes from 70 to 30 to 25 in the matter of 50 yards.
Yeah. It happens all the time.
It's like,
well, if
let the community get the ticket.
If you're
hire more policemen,
right?
Hire more policemen. Train them better in the traffic enforcement.
Right.
Actually, what we really need is more psychologists in cars.
Exactly. We need to do more studies on. We need to start doing more studies on what will happen. But this is a SB 961 proposed by California Senator Scott Wiener. If you're in the state, you can feel free to call his office and tell him that you think there's some other ways that we could reduce fatalities before we put systems in the cars that limit our speed. But Chris,
we brought up our point and our position on this. I'm actually curious what our listeners think about this.
Yeah.
I mean, do the people out there in California think that having their rights, their ability to drive slightly faster, because sometimes a little bit faster is better anyways.
Right.
How do the people that are listening to the broadcast feel about this new rule, potential law that could come into effect? And what are some of the other ways that this could either adversely or positively affect their lives, or their well-being or their finances?
Yeah.
I'm curious what everyone thinks about it.
hit us up at The Speed Traveler on YouTube or The Speed Traveler on Instagram. Let us know your thoughts. If we talk about your comment, we'll send you a Speed Traveler, one of the very, very tidy and cool Speed Traveler t-shirts. But Chris, we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some Ford Mustangs that you could buy today that we think are going to double in value. So you are listening to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We'll be right back. Okay, so that went a little long, but that's okay, pal.
That's okay.
Yeah,
I think it's a good topic, though.
It was a good topic, yeah.
It puts people on that soapbox.
Yeah, and then we can... if need be, we don't need to talk 11 minutes of F1 at the end. We can talk, 8 minutes of it.
No, we got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a good news, bad news. The good news is all the car launches are scheduled for the month of February coming up. The bad news is Andretti Cadillac will not be on that list anytime soon.
Right. Yeah, I guess they basically said he can come back in 2028. So.
Yeah.
All right.
That's bullshit.
It's a bunch of BS. You ready? Just go ahead and start.
Good to go in 3, 2, 1.
All right. Welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. I'm your host, Charlie Frank, along with co-host Chris Evertsen. Chris is joining us from the beautiful community of Carlsbad, California, via telephone today. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Loving this technology. I've never realized that you could use a phone in such a manner. You know what though? We're gonna get a new law is gonna come on the books, and you can only talk on your phone at a certain decibel level.
Yeah, right. If you talk at too high,
if your voice goes over 16 dBs, your phone automatically disconnects.
Right, and the government's gonna oversee all that
and send you a bill for your volume. Your noise abatement.
What was Ronald Reagan's great quote from the? If someone knows the exact quote, feel free to hit us up and send it to us. I think it's the 9 most feared words in the world, and it was, "I'm here from the government and I'm here to help."
Yes, it's pretty much exactly that.
Yeah. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about all sorts of things related to the automobile today. We're talking about our featured mark, which is the Ford Mustang. In our last segment, we were talking about the Senate bill that's proposing that we put a governor on our vehicles. And so if you're guessing that we didn't love that idea, we did not love that idea. But now, Chris, we're going to talk a little bit about the Ford Mustang and a few Mustangs that are out there that if you bought today, and I always tell people this, like, people that just buy a car for transportation, I always say, well, buy something very inexpensive and then buy a second one if you like to drive. Buy a second car that you just drive on the weekends, but instead of going down in value, it's kind of like stock. It's going to go up in value. I don't know why more people don't do that.
It's a weird dichotomy there, I mean, people are buying cars and like, oh, this is super, super cool, and they're really just commuters. And I get it. You're thinking you're buying a super cool car, if you're buying, I don't even get into brands.
Right.
But, I'm agreeing with you. Just if you don't care about the car and it's just a means of getting from here to there, by all means, be as cost effective and frugal as possible and just get something that gets you from there and back. But if you're into cars, it's always worthwhile having something fun. And, I would take the fun factor over the future income factor. Sure. You're buying a car that's fun to drive and you're going to have a lot of fun with it. Yeah. That smile value is unmeasurable. I mean, it just goes up and up and up. But then if you can get a car that also might go up and up in value, bonus.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, that's a big bonus. And I think when you buy some of the new cars that are out there, you buy the car, you've got a big payment, and the second you drive the car off the lot, you lose a lot of value. And in 4 or 5 years, when you're done paying the bank back for the car, you've got something that's worth half of what you paid for it. So the Speed Traveler is here to give you some advice, and if you're able to buy a second car, there's a lot of interesting cars out there that we think are going to go up in value, maybe even double in value. And, today's features or today's feature mark is the Ford Mustang. And Chris, for those of people who don't have a ton of money, there's a Mustang from the mid '80s, the Mustang SVO. And it was.
Don't say, if anyone that knows what SVO stands for, message us now on Instagram with your answer. And wrong answers are accepted, but the best wrong answer might also win a T-shirt. But the first correct answer on Instagram will get a Speed Traveler T-shirt. So what does the SVO stand for in Mustang SVO?
Right, and Ford did something interesting. It was after the gas crisis in the late '70s. So this was mid '80s, but they did something pretty crazy for them, and they built a third generation Ford Mustang. It was '84 to '86. They only built about 10,000 of these, but what was cool was that they used a 2.3 liter turbo 4-cylinder, and they were able to get a good amount of horsepower from them and crank them up. And they're just really cool little cars. You can find them for 15 grand. You can find excellent ones for 25, but you can find good ones for 15. And I think it's a undervalued car right now because it was very unique.
Yeah, a super cool car, and I agree with you. It's at that price point right now, where if you can get in, like you said, at that 15-ish range, you'll see that go up in value here. As long as you keep it in good nick, you know, drive it. But if you can, garage store it, and it's crazy. We never talk about these products that you put on cars to keep them long lasting. Take care of your vehicles. A little bit of cleaning, a little bit of polishing. Don't use scrubby, really abrasive stuff or materials, but take care of your toys, and they will actually increase in value. And that kind of goes across the board. And it's kind of funny. You mentioned a moment ago, Charlie, with the new Mustang that's coming out with the 6-speed manual transmission. And right now off the showroom floor, you can get that for 60 grand. And sure, it's going to dump some of its value, like right as you drive it off the showroom floor. But in a short few years, that manual transmission V8 Ford Mustang is going to come back up in value. And, it's kind of investing in the future to some degree.
Yeah. And, we were talking about the Mustang SVO, and it was kind of the precursor to the 2007, 8, 9 Shelby Mustang GT500. And that was a car at the time that also had 500 horsepower. That's pretty crazy because that was back in 2007, 8, 9. 500 horsepower car with a manual transmission. That Ford basically partnered with Shelby to revive that iconic GT500 name. And those are great cars. You can find those for really nice ones for $35,000. You can find them for $25,000 out there. And what a great car.
Yeah, I mean, very stylish. It's one of the early generations to start having the pop-up roll bar. If you had the convertible, it's just a great platform. I mean, Ford's been in the automotive industry for, I don't know, ever.
Yeah, exactly.
So they kind of know what they're doing, and they haven't. What I love about Ford is they haven't overcomplicated the car.
No, yeah.
Here's a solid chassis. Here's a whole lot of power.
Right.
Figure out how to get it to the ground.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the Shelby name, the most recent movie with Matt Damon, which was called remind me of the name, Chris, Ford versus Ferrari. That's a very complicated name. That was basically about Carroll Shelby, and so what we like about the 2007 to 2009 Ford GT 500 Shelbys is that it has the name Shelby attached to it. So it's pretty tough to find something for 25 grand that's got a Shelby name attached to it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. And the racing heritage between the two names, the two brands, is unsurpassed. And quite frankly, I mean, we should also bring this up. Just on the outskirts of Las Vegas is an incredible museum that you can really check out a lot of that Ford Shelby heritage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've been to it. I've got we'll put some pictures up on the YouTube page, but some incredible it's basically art pieces. Just some incredible cars that are in that museum, including the car that raced at Le Mans.
Yeah, that was such a cool car. The Golf GT. That was such a cool car.
Yeah.
And showcases. I mean, look, every brand in the world, every toy brand in the world has made that Ford GT Le Mans car, including Carrera, slot cars and scale electric slot cars. And even every once in a while, see a couple replicas out there. There's one in San Diego that I see every once in a while on the road at some of the cars and coffee events. And even as a replica, the replicas are so expensive.
Yeah, no, they're crazy. But before we run out of time in this segment, Chris, there's one other car we want to talk about, and that is the 2003 and 2004 Mustang Cobra. And a great way to track these cars down is we personally like Car Gurus, cargurus.com. And what's nice about that is you can search within 100 miles of your house, 500 miles, or across the country. We always search the whole country just to get a really good idea what the cars are selling for. And you could put in 2003, 2004, and then there's also a trim level that you can put in. And so you could put Mustang Cobra in there. But those cars, at the time, they were super powerful. It was 390 horsepower. It was a supercharged Ford 4.6. And it has the Tremac 5-speed transmission. And those cars, they built about 24,000 of them. They were everywhere, it seemed like, at some point. Now it's really hard to find one that's nice and clean.
It's funny because it's one of those cars that was very, very popular. As you said, they made a lot of them.
Right.
But they kind of were treated as disposable cars.
Totally.
So a lot of them have not stayed on the road. It's like we see this all the time. It gets a little bit harder to kind of maintain the car, or just slightly outside some mechanics purvey. It's they struggle, so they end up at the crushing yards with great regularity. I mean, you go was the LKQ, and they're stacked on top of one another. So it's kind of funny. So to find one in good nick. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but the price is not insane. So, and that, like you just mentioned, because the value will go up.
For sure. Yeah, it'll go up. And as you mentioned, it's a really fun car to drive. It's a manual V8. And we found them on Car Gurus, nice ones under 50,000 miles for $25,000. I saw one this morning when I was doing some research with 4,000 miles on it for $35,000. I was really surprised. That is, I don't know. It could be the lowest mile one left out there, because you're right. People did have a tendency to beat on these cars and drag race them and race them, and so great car. So take it from the speed travelers. The 2003-2004 Mustang Cobra is a car to look at if you like the Mustang brand. And I think it goes without saying, Chris, that you have to like actually driving the car, but it's a good choice.
Absolutely. I mean, there's Ford people, there's Chevy people, so
right.
You have to be a Ford person for this car. But Ford doesn't change their parts dramatically, so part availability is still very, very high on this car.
Right.
And so that's one of the things I like to look at when looking at a possible an investment car is something that I can get parts for. And sometimes it's worthwhile just buying an extra set of some of those rubber bushings and things that you might have just to keep them in your coffers.
Yep.
Just because they may not be available in 10 years' time.
Yep. No, that's great advice. And like you said, we made the mistake of buying a few cars that we didn't love driving. Like the one I could think of right off the top of my head, it was the Mercedes 500 SCC. It looked amazing. It looked like a Group 5 race car from the 80s, but it just didn't really drive that well, did it? And it wasn't that fun to own. So I would buy some.
Well, it was really cool for, if you're just kind of going to a cars and coffee event, but if you're actually going for a drive, it wasn't a really fun driving car.
No.
But it was a cool car. I'll stop with that. Cool car, But yes, it just wasn't the most fun to drive.
And if you want to see the car, Chris did a nice review of it on the Speed Traveler YouTube page. You can just go find 500 SEC. But with that, Chris, we're going to take a quick break. We are out of time in this segment. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about Formula One. We're going to talk about how the Formula One has snubbed American Michael Andretti in starting a team. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We'll be right back. All right, well, welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow, where we talk about cars and Formula One racing and car racing and alternative fuels and government mandates. My name's Charlie Frank. I'm joined here by my co-host and fellow Speed Traveler, Chris Evertsen. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great, Charlie. I'm excited and dismayed for this segment.
Yeah, we are going to talk Formula One news, and one bit of information and news on the Speed Traveler side is the Speed Traveler is going to launch a Formula One only podcast. And that's going to be available wherever you get your podcast. And we're going to do a little bit deeper dive into Formula One. It's tough on a radio show to go too deep into Formula One because people that aren't into Formula One have a tendency to kind of, tune out or drone out a little bit. But so yeah, if you're really, really into Formula One content, we are going to create a new show that is going to be available on our YouTube page and also on all the podcast networks. And that is going to be the Speed Traveler Formula One Deep Dive. But with that, Chris, news from Formula One. What do you got?
Yeah, it like I said, I kind of leaned into it just a little bit. It's a good news, bad news scenario for me. Good news is, like you just mentioned, the new Speed Traveler Deep Dive F1 show. The additional good news is, as we creep into the month of February, every team is going to be launching their new liveries. It's starting off with the Haas F1 team on February 2nd and going down the list all the way down to February 15th when Red Bull is the last to showcase their livery. So all the teams on the F1 starting grid are going to be showcasing their new liveries for the 2024 season. The bad news is the Andretti Cadillac team won't be on that list anytime soon.
Yeah, that is a big bummer. For those of you who are not familiar, Mario Andretti, who was the 1978 Formula One world champion in a Lotus, by the way, his son, Michael Andretti, who was also a driver for the McLaren F1 team, has been looking to join F1 for a few years now. And the Formula One organizing body turned down their application to add a new team. So I'm curious what you think on that, Chris. Apparently there's some rumors that the other 10 teams didn't want to share the money 11 ways. They only wanted to share it 10 ways. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a load of hooey. I think they're afraid. All the teams might be afraid. I mean, they tried also F1 kind of said some other things that, it'd be a huge financial burden on event promoters to have one more additional team come to their race. I don't know how that is, subject to a significant cost increase was the actual term they used. And I just think it's a load of crap. I mean, everyone says, oh, you already have an American F1 team. And yes, Haas is an American company, but the F1 team is not based in America.
Right.
Your Haas F1 team hat comes from overseas and you got to spend $15 on shipping. So it's not an American-based team. I mean, it's an American team, but it's not a wholly American team. So I was super excited about this opportunity. And honestly, I was a little taken back by this decision because I was all prepared to really talk about how Omar Sassafrazenaza, however you say his last name.
Snaffauer?
Succotash.
Yeah. Omar Snaffauer,
yeah. Potentially be the team boss for Andretti.
Oh, yeah, that would have been cool.
And how Andretti was looking at all these other teams. They started taking some mid-level players from a bunch of different teams to start developing their team, and seeing all these hires go into the Andretti camp, I was actually really expecting this conversation to be on the other side of this table.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. It's interesting because Liberty Media runs Formula One. It's an American company, and they've added 3 races in America. Well, I take it back. There was one race here at Circuit of Americas, but they added two new events in the U.S., and that's Miami and Las Vegas. So you would think Liberty Media would be really keen on General Motors, Cadillac, and really one of the most iconic names in racing, Andretti, joining the series. And I don't know, is it a case of the tail wagging the dogs? The teams just didn't want, A, the competition from a really well-funded team, and B, like we said, they didn't want to cut up their prize money. And even C, Chris, is by adding another team, they're kind of diluting their value. Like right now, if you want to go F1 racing, you're going to need to go in and buy the worst team for $1 billion. And so, it's one of those, or basically all of those I see. But what do you think?
Yeah, it's really hard to fathom what the behind the doors politicking really was on saying no. Especially since they talk about costs and everything else, and yet we are going into the longest racing calendar in Formula One history.
Right,
it's
24.
Literally twice as long as it was back in 1983, I think, where they only had like 12 races.
Right.
And then some other years where there were some issues with tire manufacturing, what have you. But 24 races. I mean, just taking the entire camp of Formula One, all those teams, and going from Brazil up to Las Vegas, or is it the other way around? There's so much cost involved with that adding one team to that, from a financial standpoint, I don't see how that's an issue whatsoever, especially since the Andretti Cadillac team would be carrying the burden of that cost. Our cookies are done.
The cookies are done.
I'm aghast. I mean, it's got to be. I don't know what the backdoor politicking is going on here, but it's a real shame for the American F1 fan. It's a real shame for F1 in general, because, I mean, bringing a name like Andretti back to the fold, we can start hearkening back to the days of lore with a direct connectivity. There hasn't been that in a while. I mean, the only direct connectivity right now is Max Verstappen and his father, Jos, who, had an interesting career. I mean, he was probably involved in the second worst fire incident in Formula One history, because obviously Man on Fire, Roman Grosjean has that title.
Right.
But I don't know. I feel like they're not looking back at the history of Formula One, and they're not looking forward at the potential for Formula One. And quite frankly, this is the kind of move that kind of could bury their growth pattern. Yeah,
no, they've had an incredible growth pattern here in the United States, and you're right. It doesn't seem very outward looking. It seems like in the short term, the teams are all worried about losing more money, and they really should be looking at, you bring an American F1 team in, you're going to have way more fans and thus more money. But hey, Chris, we are actually out of time, but I am going to propose something here, Chris. I think we're going to do a deep dive on this topic. And we'll set this out there as a standalone podcast for about 20 minutes. So for those of you that are really into Formula One, you want to hear this, I'm saying we should do a special report, Chris, the Speed Traveler Formula One special report on the Andretti team. And you can look for that wherever you get your podcasts, or go to our YouTube page.